Good afternoon and welcome to this first in a series of webinars, which are a partnership between Karpowership as well as Maiden Guardian. My name is Onkoputse JJ Tawan. I'm going to be your host for today's webinar, focusing on a new concept in South African power discussions, which is powerships. And tonight, or rather today, I'll have on the panel Sechaba Moletsani, who is the Director of Karpowership South Africa, as well as Ravin Raju, who is the Director as well, or shareholder representative of Karpowership South Africa. I also have Ted Blom, who's an energy expert, very well known in our country, and very respected in terms of his perspective on energy matters. These three gentlemen are going to engage with me in a panel discussion for about half an hour or so. From there, we will get Dr. Sechaba, who's our keynote speaker, to really just round off the conversation after listening to all of the speakers. We will then open the floor for questions from all of you as participants. I want to thank you very much for being part of this discussion. You know, power issues and load shedding and so on, on everybody's mind, especially in an economy that is not growing adequately. The last thing you need is power cuts. The last thing you need is energy insecurity. And that's why, as we speak now, government has shortlisted a number of projects that would complement the power grid and complement the power that's available to our citizens. So powerships come in that context, and that's why today we're having this conversation to ask the question, are they truly an effective part of the solution to take our issues of power security or energy security forward? And I'm going to start off now with Mr. Sechaba Moletsani, who's going to kick us off in this discussion. Welcome, Sechaba, and thank you so much for making time today to talk to us on this important webinar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tabani, and thank you for hosting us. And thanks for all the participants that have signed in and those that are viewing.
Wonderful. Let's kick it off. I mean, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about renewable energy and alternative energy, etc., given all of the woes that has bedeviled our energy security, but very little about powerships. Explain that technology to our listeners and viewers today.
Okay, well, powerships, in very simple terms, is a power station that has been put on a ship. So it meets all the requirements that you'd have on a land-based power station. All that we've done is made sure that that power station is now on a ship, and it's done such that you are able to move and deploy the solution quicker than you would otherwise have to on a land-based environment where you still have to build and construct it. This is fully constructed in a dry dock under very stringent conditions where we have to adhere to ISO and every other condition that is required to build these power stations to the exacting and high standards that we need to fulfill for our warranties and all the technical aspects that are required.
Yeah. What are the challenges that you're anticipating implementing a solution of that nature?
Well, we have been awarded 1,220 megawatts in 3 sites as Karpowership South Africa. And it's been awarded in the risk mitigation program, which is a very, very highly regulated, very transparent process that we embarked on along with a whole host of other bidders. We were shortlisted because we met the very stringent conditions that were put to us by the department in terms of all the environmental concerns, in terms of all the technical requirements, in terms of all the financial requirements, the socio-economic requirements, and the local economic development requirements. So in essence, we are quite confident and remain committed to making sure that we adhere and deliver the solution accordingly. The challenge that may be ahead for us is that LNG is a very new area for South Africa, and we are all finding our way in terms of all the requisite permits, all the requisite licensing requirements that will be needed to be able to make sure that our solution is able to be delivered and meet all the very stringent conditions that the South African market requires for you to be able to deliver energy into their grid, both environmental, technical,
Yeah.
socioeconomic, and local economic.
Yeah, a lot of discussion about the fact that this feels like an imported solution. You're telling me that this power station comes here all constructed, and we just have to sail it into the port of Kucha, the port of Saldanha Bay, and so on. What about the jobs in construction? Aren't you taking away, in a sense, jobs that could be created if you develop that power station here instead of just importing this kind of solution? What do you say to that?
Well, firstly, the reason that this, I think this speaks to what the Department of Trade and Industry had as an exemption program, which we submitted, and we got 3 exemptions for our solutions. And this was part of what the program had allocated and allowed to every bidder. I think there were a total of 18, more than 18 successful consents that were given in terms of them being able to get an exemption for their technologies, and we were one of 3. So this is because the technology that was being brought to South Africa by this risk mitigation program was relatively new, and there is no local manufacturing of a lot of the technologies that were submitted by all the other 18 entities that got the exemptions. However, because we still have a duty for local and economic development and local enterprise development and socio-economic development, we have a program where our operations and maintenance will be done through South African entities, where we will also be assisting and transferring skills for the marine economy for a technology that is new to South Africa. We are setting up a big program in terms of education. We're setting up a learnership program with one of the universities in South Africa, and we are going to be training all of the individuals that we use on our ships. We have an allocation of about 200 permanent long-term jobs in each of the project, and we have about 60 million rand.
Just more, is 200 jobs in total, or in per site or per ship? Just clarify that.
It's 200 jobs per site, plus minus, that we will have for the duration of the 20 years.
Talk about those sites for purpose of those who may not have a clue what you're talking about.
The sites are Richards Bay, Kucha, and Saldanha. So in terms of the 12 months of construction, on all 3 sites, we'll have about 673 jobs that will be available and that we'll be using for South African employment for construction period. And for the 20-year operating period, we'll have about 575 jobs on all 3 sites. But as I said, there's more to it than just the jobs. I mean, these are 20-year jobs that are medium to high skilled. We're having an academy that we're setting up. We'll provide about 50 million per site per year for this academy and for local enterprise development and socio-economic development. We'll also be spending roughly north of 250 million per site per year for the 20 years on local preferred preferential procurement. So we're close on spending $1 billion a year for 20 years, which is about 20 billion that we'll be spending on all 3 sites to assist in catalyzing economy in the area and skills transfer and job creation. That is going to have a multiplier effect, as you can imagine.
That sounds all well and good, Sichaba, but are those communities buying in? The communities of Richards Bay and Saldanha Bay, and have you consulted them? Have you reached out to them? How are they feeling about the dawn of such a project on their shores?
Well, as part of the program's conditions, we had to submit a very detailed process, what you call information on all of our local enterprise development and all of our social economic development in every one of the sites. So after we've received preferred bidder, we have now been in the process of engaging with each of our stakeholders on each site. We're in the process of reaching out and speaking to them. We have been speaking to them through our environmental processes, but we're now walking through our consultative process in terms of going out to each of these areas and speaking to local economic development
Yeah,
departments within the area and making sure that we adhere to what their requirements are, and we
yeah,
are not just coming in and parachuting, but understand what their local LED plans are and how we are able
yeah.
to fit into those LED plans, as well as add our own and new flavor to them. So that is a process that's
Right.
currently occurring as we have 4 months to close these projects. Those are some of the
Yeah.
areas that we have to deliver on as part of our financial close.
Yeah, there's a question on the chat room whether or not you were involved in shaping the requirements on the basis of which you were chosen. I mean, can you deal with that quickly for me?
Um, I'm not sure I'm understanding shaping which requirements. I mean, the risk mitigation
The
program that was
requirements of the RFP or the process or the based on which you were selected. Where were you involved in shaping those requirements? That's the question.
Um, no, I was not involved in shaping any of these requirements. We have, as a private citizen, I'm in the energy sector. I've been in the energy sector
Yeah,
for almost 10 years or 15 years. I have an operating wind farm in which I'm a shareholder in one of the first renewable program bidding rounds. So in terms of this risk mitigation program, it was a program that was run by government, and they saw the need for a risk mitigation program to be put in. It was released under the IRP that was announced by Minister Gwede Mantashe. And that's when we first found out about the risk mitigation project. And as such, we then
yeah,
prepared ourselves to bidding. So other than us being in the energy sector and
yeah.
everybody crying at the fact that we've got load shedding and something needs to be done, I think that's the only influence we've all had in our government going through this process.
All right. Okay, a lot of people, writing, particularly some of the journalists writing to say, but who are these people? Why is it like they're coming out of the woodworks? Is this an thing, etc.? Explain the genesis, if you will, of this project. Is this an international project imposed on South Africa, or is this a locally grown project? What's the story with Karpowership relationship?
Okay, well, interesting. We literally approached the Caradines family, which are a privately owned company, because we were looking at the load shedding. I think specifically it was in 2017 December when our president came back from an AU meeting because of how severe our load shedding was, and it was just before elections. We went up to Turkey in 2018 February to speak to them about looking at maybe going and asking to submit a proposal to ESCOM or to DPE or to Department of Energy, because we didn't know who would be submitting to look at risk emergency power, because the elections were coming up and there was major load shedding. So that is how we went up to them and said, look, we think this would be an ideal solution because of how quickly you can move. And I think South Africa is in desperate need of these things. So we kept making presentations to ESCOM. We made presentations to Department of Energy. Department of Energy said, look, maybe try DPE because they are the custodians of Eskom. So we went around doing the rounds, trying to figure out who would be in the position to do that. And as it may be that they didn't uptake our proposal, the elections went on, and successfully so. They ended up using more of the peaker plants. So for us, we kept looking at the market. We then, when the IRP was released, saw that they were having a gas to power opportunity and program. And for us, we were looking to prepare ourselves for the gas to power program. And then we got to understand that the risk mitigation program is also something that's there and is technology agnostic. So that's basically how we came around to partner with the Turks. I mean, we're a group. Power Group is a group of Black professionals that consists of people from the energy sector, finance, and legal. And this was based on my experience over the last 10 years of bidding in excess of 30 projects for clients, where I was consulting to different clients to submit their risk, the renewable projects into the REAP program. So we then put ourselves together as a team that felt we would be able to add value to a process such as this. And that's how we got together with the Turkish company.
I want to move on to talk to Ravin about a couple of environmental issues, because there's been lots of those environmental issues raised. But before I let you go, Sichaba, what do you say to the skeptics who are saying this is a very expensive exercise that South Africa can ill afford?
Well, let's understand that load shedding has cost South Africa in excess of 300 billion rands over the last 10 years. And as such, it will continue until a more long-term and lasting solution is provided. So in terms of what is really these numbers that people are boasting about, I think our government is very clear and understood very well how to run this process, having done the REAP program. And they understand the economics of what our government and what the tariffs that have been bid are going to affect our government and our coffers. I mean, it is what is called the least cost, least regret program that they ran, and they were looking for the least cost, least regret solutions. And all of the 8 winning bids are a testament to that, in that we are providing energy for 16 hours a day in the least cost and least regret manner. And that is how they've awarded the preferred bidder on those projects.
Please stand by. I'll come back to you, but I think I'll give you a break now and just talk to Ravin a little bit. Welcome, Ravin, and thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us as well on issues of environment in particular. A lot of noise from the environmental activists and rioters saying this is going to be a total disaster on the environment. Address me on what 2 or 3 big risks that you have attended to in preparing your bid in as far as environmental issues are concerned, where Powerships are concerned. Ravin?
Thank you, Dr. Tabane. We have environmental legislation and regulation in this country that is geared towards the protection of the environment in the long term. When we talk about risks, every single aspect that affects the environment is a risk. So what we've done is we've taken all the necessary steps to mitigate against what may be environmental effects with regard to this project. So it's not just 1, 2, or 3 risks. We look at this entire project holistically and ensure that we comply with the legislation and the regulations with regard to how we fit into the legislation and how we protect the environment in the long term.
Tell me more on a more pointed level. There has been a lot of discussion about the fact that you guys seem to have gotten exemptions in as far as environmental impact assessments are concerned. Want to address that for me?
Yes, that exemption was actually a Section 30A exemption that was granted by the Department of Environmental Affairs. That Section 30A exemption we applied for under the National Disaster Act. What we did at the time is that we were of the opinion, as a corporate responsible entity, that South Africa may need emergency energy at any given time. Emergency energy that could be plugged into the grid, that could save lives, because there were hospitals that were subject to load shedding. Load shedding at that stage was very, very high. And what we did is, in compliance with our president's directive to save lives, we made an application to the department to say, this is what we can do. We can plug emergency energy into the grid. There is a pandemic out. At the time, you will recall, Gauteng was digging 1 million graves. We didn't know what would happen, so we made the application on that basis. It seems that even though all of us were alarmed, the pandemic had settled down, no energy restrictions with regard to hospitals, etc., and the department then withdrew that authorization, a withdrawal that we consented to. This EIA process that we are embarking on now has got absolutely nothing to do with that. So this is a new process with regard to the 3 sites that we
What can we expect? Because I think that's the debate, to say there was initially an exemption. People are skeptical about what are you going to do between now and the time that you get environmental impact approval. What can we expect between now and the time that that is laid to rest?
Dr. Tabane, you can expect a comprehensive application being made to the department that addresses all the environmental impacts of the projects in each of those sites, supported by specialist reports, and that takes into account the comments made by environmental specialists, environmental groups, municipalities, important stakeholders, we call them interested and affected parties, and the ordinary citizen with regard to environmental issues that are raised with regard to the project. And that comprehensive application and report is sent to the department, who then considers the application based on all the information before it.
Yeah, a lot of nervousness, Ravin, you'll understand, especially from environmental groups. I think one of them, Groundworks, have said that you are going to kill marine life, and your ships that are going to be docking at this base are going to kill marine life. Please address that for me. There could also be a worry by fishermen in Saldanha Bay. What is this got to do to the marine life, Ravin?
Well, Dr. Tabane, our legislation and regulation also extends not only from the terrestrial environment, but into the marine environment as well. So there are various thresholds that you have to meet with regard to noise, with regard to discharges into the ocean, etc. And we are well below the legislative thresholds that are here in the country. So when it comes to the marine environment, environmentalists can rest assured that we are fully compliant and well below the thresholds that are applicable to our project in this country.
So, in simple answer, no marine life can expect to be distinct or extinct. Sorry, fauna and flora along the beach, or along the coast. Is it in any danger of any kind?
No danger at all, Dr. Tabane. What occurs is that if, for example, there are protected species in a particular area where we are working, there are the necessary permits provided for us to remove and then regrow that species in another area. So these are aspects that are well covered by the specialists that go onto a particular site, do an assessment, look at endangered plants or other species, and then provide measures which are compliant with the environmental legislation as to where they are removed and then replanted. So no extinction as you refer to.
Yeah. But tell me, in terms of climate change, I mean, we're in the midst of a big climate change debate. In fact, the president has put together what we call a climate change committee, that is looking at how South Africa is going to comply with the Paris Accord. It seems like, your solution is going to take us back to the Stone Ages with fumes and emissions and you name it. So a lot of people who are climate change activists are very nervous. Ravin, what do you say to them?
Look, we are certainly going to have an impact on climate change. All projects of this nature will have an impact on climate change. What I must stress is that we are utilizing liquid natural gas as a fuel. LNG has 50% lesser emissions than coal and 25% lesser emissions than diesel. Now, what this does for us and for the country is that it gives the South African government, the Department of Minerals and Energy and ESCOM, etc., the ability to roll out with their renewables program. We support renewables in the big. And what is important is that it must be seen as a transitionary fuel. So it's a transitionary fuel which gives you the ability to then roll out into renewables. And you have to have some kind of renewable thermal mix when it comes to your whole energy mix in the country. So yes, we will contribute to climate change, but it is a necessity and something that is certainly required when you want to move into
you don't think that in terms of our own commitments to climate change, especially in meeting the targets that would emerge out of the Paris Accord, that would have been a reason which is not apparent in terms of how your project have been chosen? Because out of the 8 projects, 3 of them are Powerships. In fact, Powerships, seem to have gotten the lion's share of generating that power. Don't you think, right, that if we were to be more compliant with those targets for climate change, that maybe the renewable and other renewables could have been the ones given more, in a sense, more lion's share of what needs to be provided into the grid? Why do you think 3? You got 3 out of the 8 projects.
Yes, Dr. Tabane, I can't really speak on behalf of the Independent Power Producers Office as to how the selection criteria was done. But I can tell you that the selection criteria was based on the fact that you were able to provide the technology that was required. You were able to meet the technical requirements. And most importantly, you were able to provide a price where there was least regret for the South African government in accepting your proposal. And I think those were the most important criteria in selecting any of the players with regard to how they would roll out on this program.
Okay, on the chat box, there's a person called Karpo who's asking, why coal ships? Why not ships that have solar PV or something to that effect? I'm sure you'll appreciate that question, being somebody in the environment. Are these coal ships?
No, Dr. Tabane, these are not coal ships. These are ships on which a power plant has been built. Let me give you an example. One of our ships is able to produce 450 megawatts of power, which is equivalent to a coal-fired power station 200 times its size. So this is a ship on which there is a power station that sails into a port and then supplies energy. It is not coal-driven, and there is no solar panels on this ship. Solar panels, generally, you put into a large field, and these are massive projects. This is a self-contained floating power station.
All right. That in terms of the other environmental issues, just before I go to Ted Blom, can you talk to me about noise levels, man? I mean, a harbor or a port is generally already noisy, and you're going to add something that's stationed there for, around the clock. What have you, any considerations around noise? Are we going to have to, get people who are around those areas to have earplugs, or what's going to happen?
Dr. Tabane, we are fully compliant with regard to the noise thresholds that are allowed in South Africa under the applicable legislation, both in the terrestrial and the marine environment. You must also remember that we are in operational ports. There are ships, there are tugboats that move around all the time in these ports. We are a stationary ship. There is no cavitation noise caused by our propellers. And the way our ship's hull is designed, the fact that we run very, very silent generation techniques, all helps to ensure that we are well below the noise thresholds in terms of technical legislation.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, Ravin. Thank you so much for engaging. A lot of questions coming through on the chat box also for you, Ravin, but I'm going to come back to you on some of those questions a little later. Ted, you've been listening to both gentlemen. Welcome, by the way, and thank you so much, Ted. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you agreeing to come and participate on this webinar. As usual, always responding to my invitations to be on radio, on television, and I really appreciate your perspective always. Now, what do you think? What is your take, Ted? You've observed in the energy sectors or in the energy cycles since the announcement of this Powership being a possibility, right? What are the one or two things that stand out for you in that discussion? Is this the right direction in terms of contributing towards what you've always argued about, that we need additional capacity into our grid?
Good morning. Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's very clear, and I'm glad that government has at last listened, that there's a dire shortage of capacity in our South African economy. However, I have some major problems with this program. Firstly, it emanates from the department where we know the previous REAP program was corrupt. The full corruption just hasn't been exposed to date. The second thing is, I have not seen the EIA for these programs. They talk about EIAs and being fully compliant. I have not seen these EIAs, and if they've been done, it doesn't seem like there was widespread public participation in these EIAs. And it goes for more than just the coastal areas where these ships are going to be docked. The EIA needs to be a proper EIA, in-depth and wide-ranging. And I'd like to know where these things were conducted and where it was published that they would be conducted. I certainly haven't seen anything, and I scour the papers quite regularly. The second issue is, if we're talking about 20 years, I mean, why have we got a 20-year emergency? Power barges around the world come in for anything from 1 to 3 to 5 years maximum. Why do we in South Africa have to have a 20-year power? I mean, those barges are going to be so dilapidated after 20 years. They're going to be stuck in the harbors. They won't be seaworthy to sail back home again. So I don't know why we have a 20-year power barge program, which is guaranteed by you and me, not by the government. You and me, we are the taxpayers of this country. Yeah. And this is an extraordinary cost on us as taxpayers for 20 years. The government has sold our children's future by engaging on a 20-year program list. And I'm sure there are lots of people who will not be happy with selling off their children's future. The third thing is, I can't understand how the bidding could have happened without Transnet leases. I'm acutely aware of what happens at Transnet. In fact, I did my articles under the former Spoornet, and you can't just go and park your barge in any harbour and free of charge. More so for these power barges who's going to be permanent visitors for a period of 20 years. You're sterilizing part of the harbor, and there needs to be a usage agreement as well, because every week or 2 or 3, there are going to be refill ships coming in, bringing in more fuel. And Transnet has said publicly in the paper, and I'm sure you're aware of that, JJ, they said there's been no negotiations with any of the parties between them and the so-called aspirant parties. So how can we fix a price if we don't know what all the cost elements are? And that just smacks of me as something fishy. The fourth issue is, I'm sick and tired of BEE with selected people in this country. And I've called for a sovereign fund to be the beneficiary of all these transactions, so the whole of South Africa's disadvantage can be benefited. Not just a few lucky people, who in this instance seems to be a very select few, 3 people, as being the BEE component of this transaction. If we're going to do proper BEE, we need to do a sovereign fund, as has been done elsewhere in the world, and then everybody will feel far happier that we are moving forward rather than enriching the lucky few. And then lastly, as I said, why 20 years? It's totally unacceptable that we've sold our future for 20 years. And I was party to discussions with Eskom, and we were offering on-land systems within 4 weeks, not within 2 years or 1 year. It's been 2 years that this program has been running to estimated delivery date. If we've got a crisis in the country, then we need urgent power, and there are other people who can offer power within 4 weeks and then 400 megawatts every month thereafter. So firstly, this seems to be a very contrived tender process, if you bear with me. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ted, for raising those very challenging issues. Let's start with this thing of 20 years. First of all, obviously, the 20 years issue was set by the department, and they're not here to answer. But I would like you to talk to me about whether or not we haven't had a discussion in this country that said we have not planned long term. You would remember that during the time where I think Vali Musa was the chairperson of ESCOM. I mean, it's moons ago, right? There were people who were saying, but why don't you plan power stations long term? And that didn't happen, and that's why we had load shedding 10 years down the line, right? How long did Medupi take to complete? How long did Kusile take to complete? Do you think that, Ted, it's unreasonable to then put a solution in place that would be, that we have a longer lead time to make sure that we are not back in 2007 again, where there's load shedding? Your views there? I mean, I don't know if this gentleman will comment on the 20 years, because that's for the department to answer. But let's talk about the long-term planning that has been missing in the South African energy mix. What's your view on that, Ted?
Okay, so it's very simple, JJ. For the two power stations that you've just mentioned, Kusile and Medupi, we should have got 20 new power stations. I saw the initial bid at 34 billion. I compared it to a bid in India for the Indian power grid. That came in at 35 billion. And I said, well, we've got a bargain. We've saved R1 billion on the tender process. And that's when the corruption started. That's when Chancellor Haas got involved, and the scoping of the thing changed 100 times. So, yes, if we had not had corruption from the ANC, the very heart of the ANC, their investment company, and interference, we would have had 20 new power stations now. They would all have been put up in the Waterberg, where there's lots of coal, and not be sitting with coal shortages in Mpumalanga, which Eskom now faces and doesn't know how to fight its way out of. So yes, you're right. We needed long-term planning, but Eskom has sold its future. Eskom does not deserve to be around anymore. They need to basically unbundle it. I'm not mad about the unbundling idea. I think it's a waste of time. But the solution lies in opening up the grid, so that you and I can also participate in an open tender or on a risk basis in supplying power to South Africa. I'm quite happy to build a power station. I believe I can do a coal power station tomorrow, and I can come in at around 40, 50 cents.
But you are agreeing, Ted, sorry to interrupt, you are agreeing that at the end of the day, we need a power mix or an energy mix. In other words, no one solution, be it solar, wind, or even these Powerships, no one solution can solve all of our problems. You're saying open it up. Are you saying that the Powerships should be ruled out? I don't have time to discuss all the others now. But in terms of the Powerships, you don't think it's a great idea in terms of complementing what is possible in terms of the other renewables, Ted?
No, look, at the end of the day, if you're going to have renewables, you're going to have dispatchable power available to balance the grid, because the renewables themselves are totally oversold in terms of what their ability is to supply power to our requirements in this country. We've got an industrial country. We're not Europe or America, where you sit with laptops with batteries and you can do with power outages or power fluctuation. We bake bread and we smelt iron ore and make things. So we need dispatchable heavy industrial power, and unfortunately the renewable is not one of them can meet that requirement. So we need dispatchable power, and the Powerships tick that box. But it's the most complicated and unfit for purpose application of what's required here. As I said, there are power islands you can import within 4 weeks. You just need to put a foundation down and you can join the grid. You don't need to double up on the transmission.
Unfit for purpose, expand?
The current power barges it confuses the whole issue. We don't need ships. We need generators, and the generators can be put right next to the current transmission yard. Now the ship comes in with an extra transmission yard. We're going to be paying for the transmission yard. We're going to be paying for the maintenance of the barge. It's just standing in the harbor, not going anywhere. All those are extra costs.
So, in your view, expensive?
It's unnecessary.
In your view, an expensive,
complicated. We can do far better with a direct answer.
All right, let me bring in Ravin. If you can just come in there and deal with what Ted is raising about the EIAs. My understanding is that that process continues. In other words, it's not complete. Am I right? In saying so, because Ted is saying this hasn't happened, he doesn't know where it has happened, and there must be a proper EIA. Address that again for me.
Correct, Dr. Tabane. No environmental application has been granted by the department. The environmental application is in the process of being developed to be filed with the department for its consideration. When it comes to participation, there have been strict requirements in place that have been put by the department with regard to notifying interested and affected parties. We have complied with all the legislative requirements with regard to the publication of environmental information in the ports where we operate. And we have, I must say, received an overwhelming response from environmental specialists, environmental groups, municipalities, communities, small fishing communities that have taken part in this consultation process. I think it's from the environmental specialists that we've dealt with. This is one of the most onerous public participation consultation processes that has ever taken place in the country with regard to this project. So I can give you the assurance that on the public participation side, as many people have been reached out to as possible. Otherwise, you would not be fulfilling a major criterion of this application itself.
Yeah. All right. Can I bring in Sichaba? If you can come in there and deal with the two issues for me. First, that Ted seems to be saying the Powership is too complicated. You know, it's very complicated. We could have a simpler solution. Secondly, it's too contrived and very narrow a process. Open it up to every Tom, Dick, and Harry essentially to be able to build a power station if they want and contribute into the grid. What do you say to him on that score, Chaba?
Thank you, Ted, for your comments, and thank you for the ability to respond to him. I think the renewable energy or the risk mitigation program was one such program where all technologies could be submitted. It was an agnostic call for proposal by the department run by the IPP program. I'm unaware of corruption in the IPP program, as Ted alluded to. But all we know is that a program was published that said anybody with any technology could submit a response to. So the technologies that Ted is talking about would have been submittable under this program, and as such would have been one of those that could be considered under this program, which is an agnostic program. And remember, the program was very detailed and very stringent in that you want technology that you know is going to be reliable, and you know that it's going to be able to meet the requirements that our specific South African context requires. The fact that our power stations are on ships, and these are, as Ted mentioned, are for emergency situations. These type of technologies are not unique to emergency situations. I mean, I'll give you an example of New York that has been run, and the electricity is running off power barges for more than 2 decades. This technology is tried and tested, and it is not just unique to us as Powership. There are various technology providers that are out there. We just happen to be the largest as Powership, Karpowership, as a group. Now, you can look at these as short-term solutions, depending on what the requirements are, or you can look at them as long-term solutions, as I'm saying is evident in New York, and we know that other European countries are looking at these solutions. Take more developed countries like Indonesia, where Indonesia, there's about 1,000 megawatts that's being generated in 4 different sites with the same technology. You've got this being deployed in Ghana. And these are not in war-torn or emergency scenarios like everybody seems to want to create the perception. The question is, what do the requisite governments that are deploying these solutions looking for, and that is what people respond to.
Yeah.
In our context, they requested a 20-year solution. We submitted our submission for a 20-year solution with the requisite pricing that is afforded a 20-year solution because of economies of scale. And we had 3 sites that we had identified that would work for this program. There were 8 bidders that were submitted. We were the second most cost-effective bid for our Kucha submission, the third most cost-effective bid for our Richards Bay solution, and I think the 5th or 6th most effective bid for our Saldanha Bay solution. So all in all, I think there's this misconception that because they're ships, there is something different about them. These ships are built to withstand and operate for more than 30 years. The shipping and marine economy and industry has been running for millennia, for a long time globally. And all we've done is taken and created a solution that we believe assists in quick deployment, but is not then one that shall only be used for emergencies. It can be used for emergencies, and it can be used for long-term deployment. And that is what we've chosen to use this one for, as long-term deployment. But it has an added advantage.
Sorry, Chaba. Vusi on the chat box is asking, where in the world was this solution deployed? Can you be a bit specific? What you are doing here in terms of multiple deployment of the solution in 3 areas, have you done that in any other country? And can you give us an example there?
As I'm saying, other than ourselves, where you can go to New York and see how New York, which is one of the most, I mean, it's the hub of the economic industries in the world, and it's been running off power barges for more than 20 years. We have solutions deployed. We've got a fleet of 24 that deployed globally. They've been running all over the world. Indonesia is a highly developed market. I mean, there are 4 of our power ships running there. We've got them running in Ghana. We've got them running in Senegal. Well, Senegal will start in June. We've had one in the off the coast of Mozambique, which was supplying Zambia through the Mozambique grid. And I think now it's supplying Mozambique, I'm not sure. But they've been around. We've got them in Cuba. We've got them in areas which, yes, there are disaster areas where we've got 1 or 2 of them, like in certain countries. I do not want to mention countries and say that disaster areas, but we've got them in areas where there are emergencies, but we've got them in areas where you've got.
Okay, that's enough. Maggie Pretoria says this is a scam and it's an expensive exercise and does not benefit locals. Can you maybe she join after you are speaking on this issue of benefit of locals? Quickly response there, Sichaba. How is this benefiting locals?
We remain fully committed to all our stakeholders in terms of the commitments that were made in our submissions. Our submissions, as I said, you had to have a robust solution for local enterprise development, a robust solution for job creation, and for social economic development. I'll reiterate, we are spending 60 million rands per site per year on social economic development and local economic development. That includes the setting up of an academy for training and skills transfer for previously disadvantaged communities that will be able to now have skilled jobs because of the training, and have training on our ships and work on our ships, not just South Africa, but they can now be used globally. We have a preferential procurement program of 250 million plus per site per year, where we will be procuring services from those particular areas that we will use for the full 20 years, and we'll keep doing that on an annual basis. So in essence, you're looking at over about R1 billion per year that will be spent on all 3 sites, on those local communities, that will benefit them for the next 20 years, and we'll keep spending that every year for the next 20 years. We also are helping to catalyze the gas market, JJ. This is a very important aspect. Because we have our FSRUs that will be there, we'll now be able to assist in the areas that I think Ted mentioned, that we're an industrial country. And the LNG market is now going to be able to be catalyzed because you'll have LNG that's available for industry to use. They can now buy LNG and pass it through the FSRUs that our NERSA licensing requires, that we actually allow for anyone that wants to use them to buy gas, to be able to buy gas and put gas and use it themselves, as long as it does not affect our initial and project that we're running. So these are conditions that we will be adhering to. We're committed to NERSA's requirements, we're committed to the department's requirements, and we're committed to all the stakeholders within the areas that we are going to be putting up our projects. So I'm not sure why the notion that this is a scam. The IPP program has been running projects for since 2010.
Yeah.
It's delivered huge amounts of
megawatts. You are saying it's an expensive scheme, not scam. I know it's an era of scams and so on. But tell me, before I go back to Ted, very important, and that could help, because there's also another question from Mike on the chat box who wants to know who are the shareholders of Karpowership SA. If you can just quickly take me through that question, but also deal with the issue of the BEE that Ted raised. Ted seems to be having beef with the fact that only a few people are gonna benefit. He wants a different type of BEE to be in place to benefit more people. Your comment?
Look, I think broad-based empowerment is a very good ideal, and it's something that we should all strive to get to. In this particular case, we looked at, as a group of professionals, a gap in the market that we felt needed to be addressed, and we said, look, let's go and spend our own money to try and convince this family to come down to South Africa. I mean, to go back to the issues of where that we don't have Transnet approvals, the bid was very specific to us, and it said, look, we need to adhere to all the requirements, and Transnet said they will engage with only those that are preferred bidders to avoid having a glut of applications to them. So we are actively engaged with Transnet as we speak, just to respond to Ted's previous question. And the BE aspect,
and then your shareholder?
We're 49% of Karpowership South Africa, that including myself, Raveen, Sureshan, and George. We are a group of professionals that, as I said, that put together a consortium that is Black female owned, majority owned, and we had the requisite skills to put this together and work with them to make sure that our submissions were beyond reproach, and we would be able to put a winning bid together. So that is how we came together around the table, and we came from different industries. I'm the one that's in renewable in the energy sector. The others were finance. The others were legal, and that's how we came together. So.
All right. Thank you, Chaba. Ted, your retort, please.
Yeah. I hear what the gentleman says, but I stand with the fact that in this case we've now got 4 people that are going to be beneficiaries of a 20-year government-backed program, and I find that unpalatable. I really think that I thought the president had made those moves, that he was going to move away from the BE and hopefully towards a sovereign fund where we can progress the nation and address core issues like infrastructural backlogs and all sorts of things that will make this country go forward.
Ted, you're not convinced about the economic impact to the communities, jobs created for this, especially in terms of in comparison with the other projects? I mean, have you made that analysis to see that it won't be the 4 people benefiting? Actually, it will be 3 communities at least who are associated with the ports where this thing is going to be situated. The skills development is talking about. Not convinced that?
With respect, JJ, they rolled the dice and they picked up some people along the port. I would have thought that the critical issues in the country, like infrastructure development, would be far, far more critical to progress the country going forward, not just some select people who happen to be hanging around the port. And I really thought, and we can look at countries, we can look at Qatar, we can look at the Middle East, we can look at a number of countries where they've rather invested in a sovereign fund. I mean, the Qatar sovereign fund has more than $10 billion a year for investment, and they're diversifying their portfolio, and they're beneficiating the interests of the country rather than select few. In this case, I mean, so we're going to have 4 billionaires in 20 years' time, or maybe in 5 years' time. And that doesn't do anything for the development of infrastructure in this country.
All right. Sechaba, do you want to respond briefly to that before I take some more questions from the floor?
Look, I'll continue saying that we are fully committed as Karpowership South Africa to ensuring that the communities that we're in, that we're operating from, we will be spending in excess of $1 billion a year on each of those communities for 20 years. That's about 20 billion that will be spent in those communities, for those communities, not just in terms of money, but in terms of training as well. We've got 60 million a year, per site per year, that will be spending for 20 years in terms of skills development, job creation, enterprise development, and an academy that will assist in putting people in an industry that they never had before. And also will be catalyzing a whole gas market for South Africa. I mean, with our total generation, we're looking at almost 1 million households that can be powered under this program. So we remain committed for all of our stakeholders to make sure that this literally is a catalyst and it's security for a small industry that has been suffering under the COVID situation and the incessant blackouts that we've had, which is load shedding. So by providing this energy, we are giving comfort. I mean, 1,220 megawatts allows us to deal with one stage of load shedding, which is at 1,000 megawatts. So with our solution, we at least are going to give a reprieve as our solution for one stage of load shedding. With the whole program and the remainder and the rest of the awarded projects, you are almost able to remove 2 stages of load shedding. So I think our government has done a sterling job in this program to try and alleviate this this load shedding issue by awarding the successful bidders, which range all across, and we're able to at least put 1,800 plus megawatts into the grid as all the winning bids to make sure that South Africa is in a better position than it was before.
All right, thank you, Sechaba. On the chat box, there, Herman is saying, I think that the company must open up more opportunities for BBB, opportunities for the rest of the country. But I hope you'll take that into account, Sechaba, there. But there were other questions, and thank you very much for all the questions that are coming on the chat box. Obviously, we won't be able to deal with all of them, but we'll try to deal with as many as we can with the remaining half an hour left for our webinar. So let's have a look here. There's an issue about consumables, right? Can you address me, Ravin? Maybe you can take that one. Consumables, these things come assembled, but once it is here, what can be expected in terms of using local, providers of consumables on these ships?
Thank you. So even though the ships are fully assembled and ready for use, plug-and-play solution, all consumables and items that can be sourced locally in the South African market will be sourced locally. And as Sechaba indicated to you, there are commitments that we have made to government in our bid with regard to local procurement. And a lot of that has to do with the procurement of consumable goods, etc. So a number of issues like lines, pipes, equipment relating to construction, etc., will be locally procured. That's during the construction phase. And during the operational phase, there are also a number of consumable items that will be required. You will require a lubrication, particular oils. You will require certain pieces of equipment. All that will be locally sourced. There's a huge opportunity for businesses that are operating around the ports where Powerships will be, to take advantage of the opportunities that Karpowership will be giving to you in relation to spend on these procurement items wherever possible. So opportunities are something that entrepreneurs and small businesses should be looking at in these ports.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer, because I think that's quite important to say whether or not for 20 years this thing docked there, will it stimulate the local economy, or will it be taking away from the local economy? And what kind of quality jobs, for example, are you going to be creating? I mean, are we talking about low level, almost semi-skilled type of jobs, or are these quality jobs, Ravin?
No, these are certainly quality jobs, Dr. Tabane. These are not low-level entry jobs where people come in and clean. These are jobs that are of a particular level of sophistication. And I can tell you that you are looking at the training of engineers. You are looking at the training of apprentice engineers. You are looking at training of people that are going to be in senior technical positions, supporting technical positions. And all of the training that we need to implement will be backed up by a South African Qualifications Authority certification, which gives them, those trained, the ability to work anywhere in the world on projects of this nature. That training is a very, very important component. And we are seriously committed to improving the quality of qualifications, as well as, to some extent, the quality of life in the ports where we are. Very important for us as a corporate responsible company.
All right. Interesting perspective over there. Ted Blom is saying you just roll the dice and you pick up a few people along the bay or the harbor. What do you say to that? Changing, will your skills development base be? I mean, is it a fair comment that he's making, that just roll the dice and you took a couple of people, 2 or 3 people along the beach who are going to benefit?
No, it's not 2 or 3 people. It's going to be a significant amount of people. Firstly, look at the number of people that will be directly employed in each of these ports for a period of 20 years. Understand that there will also be people that will be employed during construction. So apart from that, there will be the development of local small businesses. Small businesses will be able to provide goods and services to Powerships that will be operating in these ports for over a period of 20 years. As a small business, it gives you the opportunity to develop your business and grow. And as a small business, you will understand that you always want to look and go to these bigger corporates for opportunities that give it to you. So I would say that the benefits across the board in these local communities are really going to be substantial. And it's difficult from what Mr. Blom is saying to say, well, we must take whatever we, put your spend somewhere else. These are the local communities that will be affected. You have your projects in these communities. As from our perspective, it should be locally based. And it's also a view that's been shared in the RMI 4P, because there is this commitment to enterprise development in those local communities.
Yeah. And is BEE, you think is raising some valid point there about broadening the pie in terms of who will benefit? Briefly there, Ravin?
Well, look, it's a phenomenal idea to have a sovereign fund. It would be great to have a sovereign fund in the country. And I think that in real terms, major projects of this nature should benefit as many people as possible. It should be as broad-based as possible. This is a story of 4 entrepreneurs that got together out of need, identified the particular space here. And to be honest, we didn't know each other before we came together to say, can you provide the skill? What do you know about this? Can you offer assistance here? So for me, it's really not one of these limited BEE interventions. It's really a story of Black excellence in Black entrepreneurs with particular skills coming together to partner with an internationally acknowledged, highly technological company that's able to do this for us.
All right. Cyril on the chat box, Ravin, while I have you, I have your attention, is saying, what are the risk of explosions, in these ships? You park this thing there, there's all of this gas and turbines and power being pumped out of this. What are the risks of explosions?
Yes. This is not a new question, Dr. Tawane. It's been raised on numerous occasions by concerned groups and concerned citizens when you hear that there's going to be a gas project in your port. Well, firstly, we are using liquefied natural gas, and liquefied natural gas is not a flammable gas. So it is highly unlikely there will be an explosion. But most importantly, one must remember that we are in a partnership with Shell and with a company called Karmol, through our floating storage regasification unit, who together have over 100 years of experience with regard to liquid natural gas and how it operates. And we are quite satisfied that over that period of time, they have taken the necessary steps to ensure that there are safety mechanisms in place, as well as risk mitigation processes in place to mitigate against, as I said, the highly unlikely event of an explosion.
So, explosion highly unlikely. You guys have a track record of about a decade or so. Any explosions in that time?
No explosions in that time at all. Over 10 years of operations, there has never been a gas explosion on a power ship.
All right. Okay. Now let's deal with Shaba. If I may come back to you, a lot of people, are always questioning the 20 years for various reasons. But if you can deal with me on the issue of what happens after 20 years. Now, is 20 years from now, you have managed to provide whatever you are supposed to provide in terms of the grid. Now it's year 20. What happens?
Well, thanks, Dr. Tabani. Look, the program, we haven't reached a point where in any of the renewable programs, we've reached 20 years, of which I'm one of the round one bidders. And as such, the conditions are you have to rehabilitate wherever you have put your project and rehabilitate it to where it was normally. So this is an added advantage for us with our ships, because what we do is we remove the connection lines to the land, and after doing that, we take our ships and we sell them away to the next deployment. So it will basically, you have to put the area where you were, either you've built your power station, you've built your renewable power station, you've put your wind or solar, or your gas to power project. You have to rehabilitate that area to where it was before you came in and hand it over in that context. So that's part of your environmental practices that are part of the renewable or the risk mitigation program. So that's what we will do. We will rehabilitate all the land to where it is, unless
your ships won't be seaworthy to sail back to wherever they came from.
I'm very confident that I'm very confident that our ships will be seaworthy. We have a rigorous maintenance program that keeps our ships in conditions that are required by law for us to be in any marine or port waters, that make sure that all of our ships remain in a condition that is seaworthy, safe, and as you would know, all the port and our harbors are regulated from a occupational health and safety concerns, and we have to always adhere to those. So our ships will be more than seaworthy. They'll be in good condition to operate and to leave of their own propulsion out of our territorial waters.
But tell me, I'm very curious. So this ship will park for 20 years, or are you going to chop and change the vessel at some point? Is it the same vessel sitting there for 20 years? I mean, I can imagine to rust away, man.
No, yes, these ships are built with that in mind, Naritamani. I mean, when you build a cargo vessel, which is how we went and took ownership of our vessels and then put our power stations on them. They're built to withstand all the conditions within the oceans, and they operate in the oceans, in the open seas. Corrosion is part and parcel. We've got anti-corrosive painting, anti-corrosive materials that are used, not just on the ship in itself, but also on the power plants that we've employed. This solution has been in development and continues to be in development. It's a continuous development program that is of the highest qualities and standards in the world, to make sure that we do not find ourselves with any projects or programs or technology that finds itself broken, because we have to maintain and operate them. It increases our operating costs if this is not done properly. So our projects and our ships are confident that these ships will be in good shape and will last for more than 20 years.
Especially in as far as propelling the gas industry is concerned, Ted?
Sorry, your line broke up, JJ.
I'm saying, do you believe that there is a silver lining somewhere in as far as propelling the gas industry is concerned?
Look, I mean, I think there's lots of scope, as has been said, for the development of our gas industry. It's been dominated by Sasol for about 50 years, and the rest of the industry hasn't actually developed. However, given that the gas is going to be used in enclaves, I don't see that benefiting anybody doing heavy smelting work in the middle of the country. But just to as a sideshow, I mean, the tenders came in at between 148 and 184 from this consortium, as far as I can see. I was interested to hear that they didn't win, or they were not the cheapest bidder in any one of the three ports, yet they got 100% of what they offered. That makes me very interested to find out why. How come they managed to get 100% hit, despite the fact that they were not the cheapest? That's the one thing. The other thing is that this electricity has to be added, or their cost has to be added to the Eskom cost, because Eskom is going to be doing the distribution of this power. So we talk about a net to the consumer before add-ons of over R2 a kilowatt hour, which is exactly double where we are today.
Yeah, sorry. The other energy mix participants agreed and similar across all of the projects.
We can't hear you, Dr. Tabane. You broke up there. So perhaps if you can repeat that question or comment.
Cost by Eskom, right?
Sorry,
applicable to all the other projects.
JJ, we lost you there for a few seconds. Can you start from the beginning? Maybe switch off your camera to save on bandwidth, and let's hear the question or the comment again.
Yeah, I'm saying, is the issue of additional cost of Eskom applicable to all the other projects or not? Or is it unique to Powerships?
JJ, it's interesting that I think Ted is misreading the results that were issued by the department in terms of risk mitigation and who bid where. I have no clue who bid where. The only area where we've got two preferred bidders out of this program is at Kucha, where it is a project that we were the lowest submitted bid in that site of Kucha. In Saldanha, we came in at R1.60, which is the highest price that we have on any of our projects. I'm saying overall of the preferred bidders that are awarded, we were the second lowest overall of all the 8 projects, and we were the third lowest. That is very clear as per what was issued by the department, and I'm not sure what Ted, you are insinuating or saying may be afoot, but that is there in the general public. There is no, we have no knowledge of where the other bids were until they were submitted and they gave us the results as to which bid was where. So all I know is that there were 2 bids that were awarded preferred bidder. At Gucha, we were the lowest in terms of price. That was awarded at Gucha. At Richards Bay, our price was, I think, less than 150, and at Saldanha it was 1.6. So that's as far as we know. I have no other knowledge other than what was published by the department of what the other prices were. And as I said, ours was really a mix of different prices based on the location and the amount of megawatts that we were putting up in those locations. The other remaining 5 bidders also bid, and it's public knowledge. It's been put out as to what their prices were and what our prices were. So I believe we were very competitive, and as such, we have been able to secure the wins that we have. As to what other projects bid and on those sites and what their prices were, I have no knowledge of that, Ted. Maybe if you can give us an understanding of what those projects were and what their prices were.
I hope you can hear me now, and my voice here clearer. Ted, can you hear us? We lost you a bit there.
Okay, so
Ted?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, please respond.
Okay, so I mean, Mr. Moritsane said that himself earlier on in the conference that they were the 2nd, 3rd, and the 6th lowest bidder at the various ports. But now it seems to me that maybe he made an error early on, because he's now saying that he was the cheapest bidder, seemingly in all the ports. And that doesn't correlate with what was said earlier by himself. But nevertheless, I believe that there were lower bids, but they weren't successful. So aside from the 8 bidders who were successful, I believe there were other bidders that were cheaper but were not successful. So I'm not sure what criteria played a role.
Cheaper within the context of Powerships or within the context of overall mix. Would you say that
I'm talking about in the context of Powerships?
The department must mix the provisions or the providers, or must have one type of provider? Okay. Because obviously, if I'm selling wind and you are selling solar, our prices are going to be different.
Of course, I understand that. Within the context of power barges, I believe there were bidders that are cheaper.
Who are those bidders?
Well, I believe there was D&G, and there was another bidder as well, which the name escapes me for the moment.
All right. Okay, we're going to have to leave it there, and maybe get some more facts around it. But the issue is, in terms of the power mix, and I want you to just have one more comment, Ted, as you round off, because I want you to give me your parting shot, right? Are we on the right direction to pursue a power mix, right? Number one. Number two, are we on the right path to pursue something that will complement the current crisis we have on load shedding, right? And if you were to give one advice to the Karpowership people in terms of improving on things that you raised as concerns, what would that one thing be? What would be that one takeaway from today?
Okay, so I mean, the only gripe I've got about this whole scheme is that it's a 20-year scheme, and I believe that the solution could have been on the table within 5 years. So I think it's really an overkill in terms of timelines and expensiveness. Do we need a blend? Yes. It's high time that we have a blend in our power generation. And thirdly, as far as the winning bidders are concerned, I just hope that the bids are clean and that there's no government beneficiaries in the process, because it will come back to haunt them.
Or agreed that the 20 years issue obviously cannot be resolved by a powership, because that's simply a bidder. So would you think that maybe we can have an engagement with the department? Maybe would you be available maybe to a follow-up discussion where the department is present? Because I think this 20 years thing must be explained by those who put out the tender. I mean, if a tender comes out and say, tell me what you can do for me in 20 years, it is the people who are issuing the tender who must account why 20 and not 10 or not 5, isn't it, Ted?
Absolutely. It's a pity that the department wasn't present today.
Yeah, sure, because it's only a first in a series of webinars. We wanted to make sure that today we explain what Powerships are about, and then, of course, it's not the last conversation we're having. But thank you very much, Ted, for your provoking inputs that has shaped our conversation. Let me come to you, Ravin, for your closing remarks. What should people take away? One thing they should take away from your particular input on the environment, because this seems to be what comes up a lot in terms of, if you like, a pushback on Powerships, that environment is going to suffer, climate change, you name it. I know you have addressed those things during your input, but what is the one big takeaway on the issues of environment raised here today?
Well, let me say this, Dr. Tabane. I think there must be, and we give the assurance that with regard to the implementation of these projects, all environmental legislation and regulation will be complied with. There will be a firm environmental management program in place to ensure that there is no devastation on the environment. We are committed, in fact, to protecting the environment for both ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. And this is something that we have considered and realize that we owe a duty of care to future generations. So my parting shot on that is we will be fully compliant in terms of the applicable legislation and regulation when it comes to environmental matters.
All right. Thank you so much, Ravin, and your input was quite enlightening. It's you know, as you are saying, we all want a better future, you know, for our children, and so we don't want to establish any solution that would take us backwards in that regard. Tate Moletani, you heard what the people had to say about your particular solution. You've heard their concerns about jobs, about the economy, about contribution, about BEE, and you name it. What is your big takeaway from this conversation that people should be left with? I mean, if those who missed the webinar and only caught what you're going to tell me now, what would be your summary?
Well, thank you. I think firstly, I would really appreciate the program that the department has run. I would like to thank them for having run such a transparent and rigorous program as they've done before. And what I would like to illustrate or give as a parting word is that as Karpowership South Africa, we're really fully committed to assisting our government and South Africans to be able to have less inconveniences that have been plaguing us from load shedding. And we are committed to our socio-economic development principles of the country and the local enterprise development aspects of where our sites are. And as such, we're going to reiterate that we are fully committed to all the stakeholders, be it the department, be it Transnet, be it the local communities, and the metros and municipalities where these projects are going to be. We are committing to spending 60 million, as I said, per year, per site on average for local enterprise development. We're committed to spending about 250 million and more per site per year on local preferential procurement. And we're setting up an academy for the training of individuals from these communities, where they shall receive certification and be able to be part of a jobs market that will have skills that give them better paying jobs in the marine economy. So I believe that we are here to assist our government and to ensure that we power up South Africa and add to the energy mix that South Africa has in stabilizing and taking our energy program as a country forward, which assists in increasing our economic activity and security.
Thank you so much, and I want to wish you well in the work that you are doing. For me, it's refreshing to see people who are not, if one can say, the usual suspects when it comes to empowerment coming up and so on. I know that there'll always forever in the day be a debate about broad economic empowerment or narrow economic empowerment, but we have to all start somewhere in broadening the pie. And so thank you so much for what you are doing, and I hope you have taken note of what people have said in terms of your potential to open up more opportunities for more and more people, particularly Black people, to participate in this kind of opportunities that are fresh, but that are also contributing to the future energy security of South Africa. So thank you so much. Thank you, Ravin. Thank you, Ted. I wanted to say that, Mail and Guardian is known for establishing conversations. They used to have a forum that I chaired many times called the Critical Thinking Forum. If you are not critical in your thinking, you better not attend those forums, because you'll be challenged in what you believe. And I think it's important that we understand that in finding solutions for the country, different views must be aired. I was very disturbed to hear that some of the energy experts, were scoffing at the Mail and Guardian for publishing you, Ntate Molatani, last week in your, a clarification piece, or even an education piece, I must call it, where you were explaining what Powerships are and so on. And some of them were saying, how can Mail and Guardian allow itself to be used as a platform to communicate these things, which means that only certain views must be heard and not all. I just find it completely unacceptable. And I do hope that we will not have people in our midst who believe that their projects only or their views only must be heard and others shouldn't be heard. And I hope that Mail and Guardian will continue to air different views and different perspectives. It doesn't mean that if I stand up and say, oh, this project is good or bad, that's the last word. It can't be. It can only be about, ensuring that we integrate the thought processes. So that's what thought leadership is about. I hope that you will not be discouraged at all to continue as Mail and Guardian to do this. And you, Ntate Moletsane, Ntate Ravin, Ntate Ted Blom, don't be discouraged to continue to add views that may not be popular, may not be mainstream, but must be viewed, so that tomorrow we're able to shape a better country for all of us. For all of you who participated, lots and lots of you, we can't get to all of your answers, but we do promise that in a follow-up webinar, we will bring back a team from Mail and Guardian and Karpowership to address some of the things we may not have been able to address today. We will review some of the comments that you are saying on the site. We'll respond to some of them as the conversation must continue on various platforms, whether it be social media or even on the Mail and Guardian website. So with those words, thank you so much to Mail and Guardian for hosting us, for Karpowership as a partner to make this webinar happen. And we will announce very soon when the next webinar to deal with issues of energy security in our country will happen, brought to you, of course, by the Mail and Guardian and Karpowership. Thank you very much, and have a good day for the rest of the day until we talk again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.